Добрий день, друзі. Я вітаю вас.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Ukraine Media Center. I'd like to remind you that we are supported by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. And I'll tell you briefly about the schedule of our briefings today. At 3 p.m. we'll have Anton Gerashchenko with us, advisor to the Minister of Internal Affairs, and we'll discuss with Anton Gerashchenko Russian Federation's crimes in those liberated towns and villages of Ukraine. At 3:30 p.m. we'll have Oleksandr Hruzevych, spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and as usual he'll tell us about the current operational situation on the front lines. And right now I'd like to welcome Oleksandr Hruzevych, Brigadier General, Deputy Chief of Staff of Ground Forces of Ukrainian Armed Forces, and we'll discuss with Oleksandr situation around Kyiv and in Kyiv province. You're welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for finding time to join this press conference to share information. As I already said at the previous press conference, I said back then that very soon we'll get some very nice news. As you already know, I think, by now, due to our active operations, we have completely liberated Kyiv Oblast. I'd like to clarify immediately, it's not because the enemy fled, but because of our active actions started last week, which destroyed all enemy's plans, say, by 200%. They tried to repeat their offensive action against Kyiv, they kept part of their forces to cover their withdrawal, but due to our decisive action, they didn't manage to do it. As an example, in Dmitrivka alone, there have been 2 tanks within an hour and a half of combat action. Our 2 tanks destroyed more than 20 vehicles, including 12 tanks. Now the tank personnel has been recommended for higher state awards by our commanders. We have submitted the respective reports. Today's situation in Kyiv Oblast is stable. The only thing we still have to do now is rocket strikes, missile strikes by the enemy. Yes, there have been fewer of those strikes made by the enemy, but there still is the threat, so one should not ignore those alerts when they're raid alerts. You should keep to the rules. If we analyze situation by district, we have successfully liberated and checked all districts in Kyiv province, and situation is completely under control of Ukrainian armed forces and other components of the defense forces. It's under complete control. Now we have been demining, checking the territories. Yes, indeed, in various districts there are no problems with telecommunications, with transport infrastructure, but efforts are already being made, and very soon all those critical problems will be resolved about food supply, about transportation. All the instructions have already been issued. By the way, in the city of Kyiv, we have somehow changed the checkpoint structure to make wider roads. We will still have those checkpoints, those roadblocks. There will be the same mode of operation, but maybe a bit simplified. Why do we still have those checkpoints there? Because in 2 days alone, in the city of Kyiv alone, with joint efforts of our forces, we have got 16 sabotage groups. That is to say, we think like there is silence, everything is quiet, but the enemy is still here. On leaving our oblast, the enemy left their sabotage groups behind. Yesterday alone, we checked 1 district and we captured 1 group with various sensors used to adjust the rocket targeting. So you should not ignore air raid alerts. You have to be careful, because unfortunately in those groups there are also Ukrainians as agents sometimes. Yes, mostly they are people from Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, but still they are Ukrainian citizens. How they have been engaged, that's investigated by other agencies. But unfortunately, in our war with Russia, against Russia, on the enemy side, we have some of ethnic Ukrainians, some of Ukrainians and mostly those are people from Donetsk and Luhansk province oblasts. About the situation in general, it's still tense because the enemy has withdrawn and rearranging their directions of operations, and very soon they will try to take control of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. After that, they will try and renew their offensive action towards Kyiv. So there have been some efforts made. The external perimeter of defense of Kyiv and Kyiv Oblast is being extended, and we make efforts to fortify our positions and to train our personnel. Now it has been a bit more quiet in Kyiv province or in Kyiv Oblast, but that's not for the military. Now we have started active training of our personnel, new personnel, training our territorial defense personnel for active actions in almost all areas which can be used. We use them to train our personnel, to train them how to use equipment we get from our partners from other countries. We carry out tactical exercises to be prepared for possible offensive action of the enemy against Kyiv. In this, the situation is under control. Yes, the situation is tense. Yesterday and the day before yesterday, as you may know, there have been more than 15 attacks of the enemy. The enemy has been trying unsuccessfully to renew their attacks again and again. According to our data, they are already lacking equipment. If any of you have been to those liberated cities and towns of Serpin, Bucha, Ivankiv, and Bakarev, you saw how many vehicles are left there by the enemy. Many of them destroyed, and a lot of fuel. And we also find there some parade uniforms there. So they expected to get to Kyiv in 2 days and then to have a parade here. So we can say now that we have completely destroyed their plans. We have destroyed them with heroic action of Ukrainian armed forces and other components of defense forces. They have carried out their task, first of all, to prevent the enemy from entering the city. They pushed the enemy away, pushed the enemy back, pushed the enemy away. And by the way, I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate Oleksandr Hruzevych, our commander of ground forces. For defense of Kyiv, he has been awarded by the President of Ukraine with the highest title, Hero of Ukraine. The presidential decree has already been signed, and I can tell you that our commander has demonstrated all proper features like strong will, and he's used all forces to stop the enemy which outnumbered us, and we have carried out our task successfully. Believe me, it will also happen on the rest of Ukrainian territory. Very soon we'll see it. I am not to jump ahead. There have been some positive dynamics, and I think that very soon we will see some visible changes. Why? Because now we already see T-62 tanks on the enemy side, and T-62 is a type of equipment which is not just aged, but you know, it's like very old equipment. Yes, it has been modernized, it has been upgraded. They sold it to Syria or somebody, and now we already have it around our border. So the enemy has been exhausted already, and that's due to efforts of our armed forces as a whole. Now, when checking the liberated territories, we find a lot of documents which confirm that Russia was preparing for active action, for offensive action against Ukraine since long ago. Yes, they were hiding those preparations. Just for you to understand, on the working operating map, there is a complete map of the city of Kyiv, all those routes for entering and exiting. It says Ulan-Ude, but there is a map of the city of Kyiv. I don't know why they marked it as Ulan-Ude. Well, that's on their conscience, but anyway, they didn't manage to do it. So, to summarize, I would like to emphasize again that so-called Russian world, which they try to bring here, we have seen it with our own eyes in Irpin, in Bucha, in Makariv, in Ivankiv. And these are terrible things. I have already witnessed these hundreds, there have been hundreds of dead bodies of innocent civilians killed, shooted in their back of their head with their hands tied. It's not done like that in 21st century, but we see these things which just cannot be. Even when there is war, there are still some laws of war. There are international treaties, and civilians should not suffer. And the Ukrainian armed forces, if we plan some firing, some shelling, we care about local civilians, first of all. And believe me, we would never issue an order for any artillery shelling and other type of shelling, other type of fire against cities with innocent civilians. We never issued such an order. While Russian army neglects those rules. Unfortunately, it's such a pity for us, but there will be some punishment from heaven on them, and enemies will die, and we will win. The victories will be ours, not theirs, because we stand for truth and we are in our own territory. That's basically it as far as situation in Kyiv and Kyiv Oblast is concerned. If there are any questions, yes, thank you. General, if you have any questions, please use the microphone. Thank you. Good afternoon. Mr. Hruzevych, I'm Arsen Symboluk from CGTN China. My question is this. Within the context of what you mentioned, like if they are successful in the East, they may try a repeated attempt to assault against Kyiv. So now you see there are civilians returning to Kyiv quite actively. First of all, how active they are, those civilians? Do you have any data? And second, what people should do and what to monitor, and when is that offensive against Kyiv possible, if possible? Well, I would like to warn, not warn, but to explain something immediately. The enemy had two strategic goals. First, to get to the administrative boundaries of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, and second, to take Kyiv, capital city of Kyiv, as soon as possible. And then they would put the whole country on our knees. They failed in both cases. And now the enemy rearranged their forces to get at least there. Well, if there is no success, well, there is a probability that there will be a repeated attempt of offensive action against Kyiv. We have that feeling, like there is that feeling, and we in the military have that feeling that those skills of forecasting situation is like it's like when playing cards, people say I have a feeling. So we have that feeling, not just feeling, but based on the enemy's forces that we still see, we see that one of the possible variants how things will develop will be another attempt to take Kyiv, no doubt, because it will enable them to dictate their terms to look a winner in this situation. Because, in this situation, Russia is like a wolf which is in the corner, put in the corner. There are international sanctions and everything, and they're only based on their propaganda. You can see their fakes they keep disseminating. And we have data like people communicate with Russians, and Russians still believe that the Russian armed forces do some good things. They liberate somebody. But I don't understand how, say, if I enter your home with my family and I'll tell you that you live in the wrong way, you eat in the wrong way, you walk in the wrong way, then you will probably tell me, go to your own home, and I will sort out situation in my home on my own. But still they have those imperial ambitions. They try to get things back into a situation we had in the Soviet Union. But we have what we have. When when it may happen, I cannot tell you, but still there is some probability that the enemy has not finally dropped their goal of repeated assault on Kyiv. There is this threat still. Thank you. Any more questions? By the way, I'd like to add, because some of the enemy forces withdrawn to Belarus are still there in the Republic of Belarus, and believe me, this is quite a strong group of troops. They withdrew, some of them. We destroyed about 1/3 of those troops. They move another 1/3 to the east, and 1/3 stays in Belarus, in the Republic of Belarus. So, you know, from the strategic and tactical point of view, we should not exclude a possibility that they will repeat their offensive action, because if you now move all our forces to the east to defend the east, then you see, and from the other side they would be able to enter. But we don't do that. We make every effort to maintain defense of Kyiv and Kyiv Oblast. We will prevent it from happening. Thank you. Any more questions?
Kunis from the Asahi, Japanese newspaper. You said that there are hundreds of corpses, dead bodies in Kyiv and other cities. Do you mean that we will see the scene as a butcher in Kyiv or other cities?
Sorry, could you repeat? Does it mean that we will see?
In like a butcher in Kyiv too.
Look, we have information about similar situations in Makariv, in Ivankiv, but at the moment, the government and armed forces have made decisions and created a number of teams to collect the evidence, to gather evidence, because there are different sorts of information. Everything has to be checked. You see, the enemy. If they have done it, we will accuse them of that. If they have not done it, we will not accuse them. But you know, the cruelty that we see in those locations that we liberate, you know, in Bucha, in Irpin, it has been on a mass scale, but there have been cases of torturing civilians almost everywhere. There is a small village, for example, I don't remember its name, and there was an old granny who just left their home, and she had a mobile phone in her hands, and she was shot from the assault rifle, and she was killed, and it was recorded by the surveillance camera. And you know, she was an old granny. What could she do? So there are such cases, but unfortunately, there are also some cases of mass scale. We just need time to find and document all of it, because, for example, with all due respect for Italian government, they don't believe in it. They still believe that Russian Federation is doing right things. I have witnessed, I saw some videos where somebody wanted to defend Russian Federation, but our Ukrainian lady who is in Italy now spoke and demonstrated the facts, and then the Russian spokesperson immediately stopped talking. He said, I don't have any more questions. They know clearly, they know everything for sure, but now they have been trying to show as if they didn't do it, because there has already been information, there has already been some facts where they have been destroying the trace of their terrible actions in those territories. They have already done it, but when this information has been disclosed, they try to destroy the evidence, and we already have the evidence of that. So, you know, over time, everybody will be brought to liability. Thank you. And I'd like to also add that at 3 p.m. we'll have a spokesperson from the Ministry of Internal Affairs who will tell us precisely about the situation from the Ministry of Internal Affairs side, because the MIA has been collecting evidence of crimes committed by the Russian army in territory of Ukraine. If you have any other questions, you're welcome. Just the microphone, because otherwise the interpreter will not hear us. Several days ago, Prosecutor General Irina Venediktova said that in Borodyanka we can see even worse things that we saw in Bucha and Irpin. Yesterday, we, with many journalists, due to media center, got to Borodyanka. We saw a lot of destruction there, consequences of airstrikes, rescuers, checking the ruins for bodies, but fortunately we haven't seen any dead bodies in the streets. Is it that we just were not shown those bodies? Are there any bodies somewhere will we be shown? Or in Aviditkova meant just airstrikes? You know, there were strikes against civilian facilities, civilian towns where there are no military facilities. What is Borodyanka? Borodyanka is the usual Ukrainian town. There is no military unit there. And it has been destroyed by almost 50%. Why? For which reason? We don't understand it. So, yeah. The most terrible sin is to kill the person, but to destroy somebody's house is also a sin. So, according to our data, I can tell you that in Borodyanka there are places with bodies, because there were mass killings, mass shooting, and they removed bodies somewhere to some forests, and people were brought to some forests and people didn't see them anymore. But we haven't found them yet, and everything has been with mines, should be demined, and then we have to check and either to confirm, to prove it with evidence, or disprove it. But there are some data there that it was done, but at the moment it's just words, you see. So to that end, we have created those teams which will now be checking for evidence. But first of all, we have to clean those territories from mines and artillery runs, from projectiles, and there are a lot of those. There is a lot of work. We have been checking and demining Bucha for almost 1 week, and we still find a lot of those there, a lot of those mines. We remove some of them. Some of them we need to destroy on site because we cannot transport them. This is a long time process, you know. To put landmines, it takes, say, half a day, but then to remove them, you would need a week to remove those mines. So, yes, we have information, like the Prosecutor General has. We also have that information, but we have, you know, what you saw, what you saw, and we would hope that that information would not be confirmed, but unfortunately we have that information. Yes. Any more questions? No more questions. Then thank you very much, dear General. Thank you for finding time to join us. That's extremely important, and I'd like to remind you that 3 p.m. we'll have Anton Gerashchenko, spokesperson of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and we'll speak with Anton about war crimes of Russian army in the liberated territories, in liberated towns and villages. Please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for attention.